I'm Tammy Vindanger, host for Executive with the Cause. Today on the show, I welcome Kate Luke, the co-founder of Little Oak Sanctuary. Today, we're going to chat about the good, bad, and hard things about running a charity. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tammy. I'm really glad to be here.
We met, I don't know, it's probably, I want to say at least 6 years ago, something around that. And there's a famous sheep story between the two of us, of all things. Chris the sheep, if anyone wants to look it up, Google it, and you'll see why this became a very large media story for both of us. When I was the CEO at RSBC ACT, and my team rescued the sheep. And then ultimately, we wanted to find a good home for it, and he landed over at your sanctuary.
Yeah, he sure did. And we cared for him until he passed away, probably 5 years after that. Yeah, so he was a wonderful sheep and touched so many people, the story of Chris, and still does today.
And if people want to see the wool that was sheared from him, that's still at the National Museum here in Australia.
Yes.
In Canberra specifically. So if people want to look him up, they'll be able to find that story because it was quite famous at the time.
Definitely. I think he still holds the world record for that fleece. So,
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, for people that don't know about your organization, could you tell us more about it?
Sure. So Little Oak Sanctuary is a sanctuary for farmed animals. And so people might be familiar with wildlife sanctuaries and that sort of thing, but we actually provide refuge for farmed animals that have come from backgrounds of abuse, neglect, or abandonment. And often where they have no other option, so there's no other safe place for them. So things like people getting pet mini pigs and things like that turn out to not be so mini. They grow to at least 150 kilos. Orphan lambs, roosters. We've got ex-thoroughbred racehorses that have had no other option. They would have otherwise been sent to slaughter. All sorts of different animals from different backgrounds, even goats from research facilities and things like that.
I remember those goats. And I also remember you had amazing names for all the animals. So the goats are very large because they were, as you say, research. Can you just explain or share some of the names that you gave them?
Sure. So we do have a bit of a weakness for pun names, I must say. So we have Alexander Goathorn Bell. We have Isaac Newthorn, Leonardo de Blitzy, Charles Barwin, that sort of thing. So because they were ex-research goats, we gave them all kind of scientist names as well to tie in with that.
I love the name, but also not just because it's fun, but because it's great for marketing as well.
Yeah, we really find it's a great way to grab people's attention and get them to, look more into things. And yeah, we found it really successful as well. Plus, we have a lot of fun doing it.
So why did you start the sanctuary?
So it's a bit of a long story, but we started the sanctuary back in 2012, and before then, we were living in suburbia, and we both had day jobs, and we decided to have a tree change, so we moved to a small property just outside of Canberra. And because we had the space, we just started taking animals in. Then in 2011, when the ABC broadcast that story about the live export, that huge live export expose, that really, really touched us and got us looking into more about animal agriculture and just because it was so horrific and we wanted to know what things were like in Australia as well. So we started looking into it and we just started taking in rescued animals just because we had the space and, we wanted to actually do something to help those animals. And two of those animals were two little piglets. So we named them Heavenly Harani Tiger Piggy and Little Timmy Piglet. And they just blew our mind to how amazing pigs were. We didn't have any experience with pigs. We'd never met a pig, I don't think, before in our lives. But we took these two little piglets in and they had been from a commercial piggery and they were runts and so they were going to be killed. But one of the workers saved them and was going to raise them, but it turned out they were sick. They had a cold, and so he didn't really want to go through all that hardship and effort to get them through. So we heard about them and we took them in. And as I say, they just blew our mind. They were such incredible little personalities. Like little Timmy was only 3.5 kilos and Tiger She was 5 kilos, but they were just such distinct personalities. And Timmy would like run around our lounge room doing these mad little spins and everything. And Tiger would always be chewing like your zip and everything. Like they'd just always be in your face, and they were just adorable. And Timmy was very snuggly as well. He liked cuddles. So they really blew our mind, and we were just so amazed at these like little creatures. But then sadly, as the months went on, Timmy ended up getting an infection, and we had the vets and all that sort of thing. But after probably about 4 or 5 months, he actually ended up passing away. It was during a vet visit, and it seems like the infection had gotten into his brain, and he had a seizure right when the vet was there trying to help him. So he passed away, and that really broke our hearts, obviously. You know, when you have an animal that you've really bonded with and gotten to know as an individual, like it really does. It's like, you know, losing a friend or a family member almost. So we were heartbroken, but I was also heartbroken that nobody had really got to know him the way that we did. And so we started the sanctuary in his honour so that we could share the stories of individual animals like him with the hope of helping people make a connection with farmed animals as individuals, because we very rarely get to see them as individuals. We just see them as, you know, a mass of sheep as we drive past, and we don't really get to know that they're all actually individuals who, you know, are sentient and have the capacity to feel pain and fear and all that sort of stuff. So the name of our sanctuary, Little Oak, came from, we planted a little oak tree over his grave because we felt that really symbolised him as an individual. He's a really strong personality, and so our initial catchphrase, I guess, was planting seeds of compassion out of that. Yeah.
Now, this has not always been an easy ride, though, because as you said, at the time you both had jobs, and I know you're in a much bigger place now. So how did you fund the sanctuary as you continue to take on more animals?
So originally it was funded through our jobs largely at the beginning. Obviously we started we registered as a charity, and we started taking in donations and that sort of thing. But we soon realised the property that we had bought as just a tree change wasn't going to be appropriate, like wasn't going to be sustainable as a venue for a farmed sanctuary. So we went searching for a property which we funded personally. So we bought another property which is about an hour out of Canberra, or 2.5 hours from Sydney. And that's about 200 acres now. So it's a lot more sustainable for the type of work that we want to do. We have both been working. I was working full-time for the sanctuary has now been running since 2012. So up until the beginning of this year, I've been working at least part-time and trying to run the sanctuary as well. And my partner is a professional musician and teaches music as well. And so he's still doing that. We're working towards having the sanctuary as a primary focus. For me, it now is. For my partner, that's still a little ways off.
And how many animals are you looking for after now?
So at the moment, we have over 300 animals in our care.
Wow.
Yeah, it has grown quite substantially.
And talk about the range of animals that you have now.
So we have pigs from all sorts of different backgrounds, but a lot of mini pigs, people who buy pet mini pigs, and they're told that they only grow to, you know, the size of a kelpie, when in reality, at least they're going to be at least 150 kilos. So we've got those. We've got ex-dairy cows. We've got a few horses, ex-race horses, and we've also got some little ponies who've come through really bad neglect during the drought. We've got goats. We've got sheep. We've got all different kinds of poultry, so chicken, lots of roosters, ducks, geese, peacocks, alpacas. I think I've covered them all. I hope I'm not missing anyone.
I was thinking peacocks probably don't fit under that farm animal category.
It's a bit loose at the edges sometimes. Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a lot more stories probably around some of those species more than others for this area. Mm-hmm. But For that many animals and the diversity of animals, so like I can only imagine how much work that is for you guys to do that and jobs on top of that. How do you sustain that?
Well, that is definitely our primary focus at the moment, just making it so that we can be a sustainable organisation, because it is obviously a lot of work, and especially a lot of work on predominantly the two of us. So we are working towards having live-in volunteers and that sort of thing, and we're also been working quite hard on improving our fundraising so that we actually can employ staff, so that we want to get the sanctuary to a point where it doesn't need us whatsoever. So so we can actually be separated from it if need be, or the time comes, we're not going to live forever. We want the sanctuary to keep going after that. So we rely on, obviously, veterinary professionals, and we have also, things like shearers, farriers, that sort of thing. So there's a network of people, and we also do have about 50 regular volunteers as well.
And how many employees do you have right now?
Just 2 part-time.
And that's you and your partner?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of work. And just like the feeding regime every morning, do you have volunteers that support that as well?
No, that's generally us. So that's where we're hoping if we can get some live-in volunteers to help with that, just kind of day-to-day stuff, which will free us up to do more of the larger projects. So I guess that's been a bit of a sticking issue for us, especially with climate change and the impact that we've faced over the last few years with the fires and the drought and now floods. All the associated issues that come along with that from a practical point of view take a lot of time to manage. And so that takes us away from, for advancing some of our other projects that we'd like to do.
Before we started the show, we were talking about the floods in particular, because we have had a lot of rain in this area. And I remember driving to your place when we were transferring Chris over and having to go through the creek.
Yep.
At the time, it was during the drought, though.
Yep.
So I've noticed on Facebook how many times you've had to get some help to try to just get back onto the farm or out of the farm. Do you want to talk about some of the infrastructure projects that these climate change events have impacted you, but also even the drought has impacted you?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we had the period of extended drought, which was quite difficult. It led to there being no pasture and that sort of thing. So we're having to buy in a huge amount of hay and feed and that sort of thing. Then we had the fires of 2019 and 20, and obviously that was a whole traumatic experience, and we had to evacuate most of the animals just to safer areas. And then we had the pandemic, and then we've gone into floods. So it's been one thing after the other. But one thing that we did build during the drought, which has been fantastic, is a bridge over that creek, which is our main access. And it's meant that even if we are flooded in, which we can usually see coming, like we can usually tell by the forecast if it's likely that we're going to be flooded in. And in normal years, it would probably be about once or twice, but this is La Nina conditions, so it's been quite frequent. So we just ensure that we've got a huge amount of feed on hand, take care of any preventative vet issues, and the bridge has meant that we can get out quite quickly after that, because it'll flood, but it'll go back down quite quickly, and the bridge has, touch wood, held up through the amount of floods that it's been through. And so that's really been fantastic.
I don't think people really understand the size of your space. I was even impressed by the fact that you had a place for quarantine when you're bringing a new animal in, that you'd separate them to make sure.
Definitely. Yeah, and as our number of animals has been increasing, that pressure is put on that kind of thing. But it's very important, because we're not a typical farming model where you've got a closed system where animals are just being bred and then sold off. We've got animals coming in from all different sorts of backgrounds, and they're generally not great backgrounds. So they're coming in with all sorts of potential parasites or conditions, and we need to protect the animals that exist on the sanctuary as well. So quarantine is really important to us. And we have actually recently won a grant to build a new stable complex, which will really improve our capabilities to do that. At the moment, we're limited to just a few stables that we've got, but we're going to have a few, probably 6 more, so that will be fantastic.
I'm curious about your background because, here we were talking about a massive property with things like quarantine to worry about and building bridges and stuff like that. And you said your partner is a musician. So how in the world do someone like you, and we haven't talked about your background yet, not only do these types of very physical farm activities, but then also the administration side of it?
I guess, well, I've always been an animal lover, so I've always had that background. But I've started off as in accounts and management accounting and that sort of thing. So I've got that background. That was basically because my father told me, I need to do something responsible. But I also had a passion for photography. So also not very helpful with farm stuff, but it's great for the marketing side of the business. James is my partner. His parents were goat farmers, so he's got some background in that. I had experience with horses and a lot of other animals, but it's just been a huge learning experience. And I guess starting on the smaller property gave us some insight into property management, but this new property at 270 acres is quite a new thing. But James he's the property manager, and he does a lot of research into pasture management and earthworks, fencing, all sorts of different things. So he's actually built up a huge amount of skill and expertise in that kind of thing. And as far as like animal care, it's just ongoing learning. So there's fortunately a lot of other animal sanctuaries out there, and some larger ones in the US, in fact, that have a lot of resources available. And there's also a kind of network of animal sanctuary people who will support each other and provide information. So it's certainly been a learning curve, but I think because it's such a passion of ours, we've just, I'm also quite a problem solver. So whenever there's something that we face, I'm always looking for a solution for it. So
I think you should talk about the pigs. Since that was your first, and I have very strong memories from visiting your property about the pigs, about what you've had to do because they're so smart.
Yeah, they are so smart. They're like at least as smart as a 3-year-old human. And when you team that with their size and strength, that can be quite challenging. And I think a lot of people underestimate that. But they're such incredible personalities. They're all so very different. We've got 19 pigs at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah, so we took some in after the fire. There were people whose properties had burnt and they could no longer take care of them. So we took in a few from there, and the others have been pet mini pigs or that sort of thing generally. So they're really incredible, but obviously quite challenging with anything medical that you need to do to them, any vet care, because they are like toddlers, but they're about 200 to 300 kilos. And they hate needles. I'll tell you that much. So yeah, we have some great facilities that allow us to treat them with minimum stress. So basically using yards that we can just put them in, treat them quickly, and then return them. And that we found that so much less stressful for the animals. But yeah, they're very smart. So just ensuring that our fences are great and, they can't get to any latches or anything like that. But yeah, they're really incredible animals, and we've learnt so much. They build nests and all sorts of things. So we've got one pig, Dr. Seuss, he now lives with Heavenly Harani Tiger Piggy, who's getting on now. Like they're now 10 years old. So they're elderly pigs, and they're over 300 kilos, each of those guys. But they have kind of interior decoration wars because Dr. Seuss has, I often see him carrying like a branch or a sprig of something that he's found, and he's very proudly trotting across the paddock back to the nest to put it in the shelter. And then you'll watch, and Tiger will go and take it out, and then he'll go and put it back in, and then she'll take it out. They have these little wars. It's quite entertaining.
I don't think people appreciate, like you said, farm animals the way that they do dogs and cats.
Yeah,
so it's
for
great.
sure.
It's great to show off their personalities.
Yeah.
Let's talk about fundraising a little bit more because I've noticed on your website you have some very creative ways to try to fundraise. So let's talk about how did you get into glamping?
Okay, so I guess we're looking at different ways of, diversifying our income streams, and we have obviously our general donations and that sort of thing. But we wanted to, people are quite keen to spend as much time as they can at the sanctuary, and without expending too much money and like building a cabin or something like that, we decided that maybe glamping would be a great way to go, and it has proven to be very popular. Outside of heavy rainfall events and that sort of thing that we do have to contend with. But yeah, it's been really popular. People can come out and stay at the sanctuary for a night and, come on the feed run with us. So they get to spend that, bit more time than they would on a tour or that sort of thing. And it's like a private tour basically. So people have been really enjoying it.
And a very creative use of space.
Exactly. Well, we've got the space, that's for sure. And people just really enjoy having that time to be able to just sit back and relax. And it's off-grid, basically. We've got solar power, battery electricity, and all tank water and stuff like that. So it's a real kind of disconnect from, the busy city life.
And then I know you have the Compassionate Stakes, which is aligned with the Melbourne Cup, which is, if you're not familiar with the Melbourne Cup because you're living in another country, then Google that and you'll understand the extent of that. So talk to us more about that fundraiser.
Yeah, so we're always looking for creative ways that we can engage with people, and we knew there's a growing number of people who weren't happy with horse racing and didn't want to support it, and we wanted to tap into that audience and provide them with a really fun way to spend the afternoon, because for those who aren't aware, on Melbourne Cup Day, a lot of officers will have traditionally kind of partaken in the race by, running office sweeps and that sort of thing. But with a growing number of people who don't want to be involved with that, they want something else to do and they don't want to feel like a party pooper. So we've provided this event, which is basically T-Rex costumes. So racing, a set of novelty races of people wearing T-Rex, giant inflatable T-Rex costumes, we ran it in 2019 before the pandemic, and it's absolutely the most fun you've ever had in your life. It's just hilarious. They actually flail when they run, so it's so much fun. And it's a really good way to even just draw people in, and we have information about horse racing at the event, and all about the sanctuary and things like that. So it's a great way of attracting people in to learn more about it. And we do try and do that, have like really positive events that draw people in.
And then I also noticed you do a huge amount of merchandising.
We do. So we do have a lot of merch, and it is one of our income streams. So we have, T-shirts and that sort of thing. We also have our calendar, which has proven quite popular. All sorts of things like tea towels, tote bags, purses, stickers, that sort of thing. We do try and, sustainability is one of our missions as well. So we do try and make items that aren't just, going to go straight to landfill. So we have a lot of thought into the items that we do choose, and they're usually all organic cotton or bamboo and that sort of thing. So we try not to just mindlessly be creating stuff, but we do try and find things that will be useful for our supporters.
And so of the ones we've talked about, and then general fundraising itself, what percentage of your revenue would be coming from the more traditional pathways of fundraising and these other ones?
So our main source of income is donations from the public. We don't actually get any government funding whatsoever. So we're just mainly funded by the public. And then we have probably about 20% through events and merchandise. And then we have been successful in a few grants as well, but that's generally for capital projects. Yeah.
And with a facility and space as big as yours, you actually need that.
We definitely do, yeah. There's a lot of infrastructure needed. Yeah.
I saw one of your fundraisers recently was to replace, was it a excavator, bulldozer, something like that?
Yes. And we were relying on a 1961 Chamberlain tractor to do a lot of the property management work. So that includes trying to maintain our driveway, which is access to the sanctuary, all pasture maintenance, harrowing. Well, I won't get into it too much, but all sorts of pasture maintenance and this poor old 1961 tractor. It is actually still running. It's just its 50-year-old tyre exploded, so we needed to update a little bit. So we've gone for a 1980s model.
That was an improvement.
Oh, it's quite fancy. It's actually got a cabin and everything, so James is quite happy.
So when you have all these big capital requirements, and obviously as an organization, you have finally just been able to pull yourself away from a job, and you don't have any other employees right now. How do you plan for the future, knowing that you could have big expenses based on another flood or a fire or anything like that?
Yeah, so we've been gradually trying to build a reserve so that we've got capacity to deal with those sort of things, because in doing what we do, our core thing is making sure that the animals that we have in our care are safe and secure, and so we don't want to put that at risk. So we've been working on ensuring with our fundraising that we do have a reserve so that we can handle those sort of things. Because they definitely, especially with climate change, we've just seen over the past few years, it's just going to be, one extreme to the other. So we're just trying to be as prepared as we can. And we're also trying to mitigate what we can through some practical things. So as far as like the drought, we've been expanding our number of water tanks and that sort of thing so that we have a huge amount of rainwater storage. And fortunately, during that extended last drought, we didn't completely run out of water except for a few tanks. And planting more resistant pastures and that sort of thing. So we're trying to do a few different things. So ensuring we have the buffer of finances and some practical measures.
I was just thinking of also the use of volunteers. So you do live far away from a major city, so that doesn't make it easy. And right now, you guys are doing at least the morning feed. How do you use your volunteers right now? You said you had about 50, I think.
Yes. So we have about 50, and we tend to have them over the weekend. So we have a couple coming out during the week, and then we have probably about 5 to 10 come out every weekend and help with some maintenance tasks like cleaning out all the poultry sheds and that sort of thing. As we go forward, we're looking at having people staying at the sanctuary to help out with the day-to-day stuff so that then our weekend volunteers will be able to help with more project-based things, which is building new fences, new enclosures, that sort of thing. So it'll increase our capacity to do those sort of things.
I know there are other sanctuaries around the world that have been very successful in attracting volunteers that'll even pay for that opportunity. So
yes.
I imagine you've already thought of that.
Yeah. We've got some contacts with like the local wombat rescue groups who have the same kind of thing. They have some live-in volunteers from time to time. So we're definitely talking to them about how they do things and seeing what we can learn from them.
Yeah, excellent. Now, how are you managing all this? Because, we've just talked about a very physical type requirements of looking after the animals and the ongoing maintenance of space.
Yeah.
And then you have the whole administration side. Do you have any help from the volunteers for the administration side?
Not a huge amount, no. So I've been pretty much doing most of the administrative stuff on my own. We have had some help over the years with certain tasks, like certain project-based tasks, but I've also just over the past few years really been trying to streamline things and automate as much as I possibly can, which is still a work in progress. I still have tasks that I think I should be able to automate this, and I'm just trying to run through ways that I can actually do it. There's definitely improvements that can be had, but and definitely probably things that I could outsource, but it's just finding the time to go through everything to actually work out. So it's definitely a challenge.
Let's talk about automation a little more because that's a favorite topic of a lot of not-for-profits.
Definitely.
Tell us about some of the things you've already set up.
So we use ActiveCampaign for our newsletters, and we have one of our income sources, a way of donating to us is by sponsoring one of our rescued animals. So people can make a one-off donation, one-off sponsorship payment, or they can become a regular sponsor, an ongoing monthly sponsor. And we send out a newsletter every month. And so to get them into just little things like just to get them into active campaign and set up the right categories and to have the animal sponsored that they've sponsored come up so that it can basically populate the newsletter so that it's going out to that particular person who sponsored that particular animal in that animal's voice. I've done that through Zapier and that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's one thing. Drawing a blank as to what else I've done.
Well, it used to be, I mean, at least I saw that you have a Salesforce administrator
Yes.
certificate. So even if you're not using it now, and I think you are, you do know the capability of some of the technology.
I definitely do, yes. I think it's such a huge program, though. I haven't quite broached using it for the sanctuary yet because I think it would take quite a lot of my time and focus to actually work out how we could use it and how we could best use it and migrate everything over. I think once we have a few more helpers and I've got a bit more capacity to think about it, it'd definitely be something. I know it's a fantastic program and it is just so, there's so many capabilities that you can do with it. So,
Remind me to introduce you to Jessica McPherson,
okay,
one of our previous guests, and she might be able to help you out.
fantastic.
Right now, as an organization, you've seen a lot, like you said, the last few years, just environmentally, you've been impacted by climate. What are your challenges that you're seeing for the future?
Definitely climate change is a huge one. There's also obviously economic uncertainty with, changing political spheres and that sort of thing. So climate change is probably one of our biggest challenges, though, because we are right at the face of it. So we're operating on the land and it really does impact a lot of what we do as far as, our expenses and that sort of thing through the drought. We're going to need higher amounts of feed. It also impacts our work as far as the animals that are coming to us. So in the drought, a lot of people surrendering animals they can no longer care for, or there's more animals being neglected that come to us and that sort of thing.
Do you ever turn away animals?
We unfortunately do, yes. We get far more requests to take animals than we can cope with. So we do adopt animals out as well. So sometimes we're able to tee people up if we've got an adoption waiting with someone who's wanting to surrender. We can tee those sort of people up. But unfortunately, the number of roosters, for example, that we're asked to take in, and unfortunately, I think people just don't understand, and I know I wasn't really aware of the fact that, statistically, for each egg that hatches, 50% of them are going to be roosters. So you think about all the people with backyard chickens and all the backyard breeders of chickens, and then you add on school hatching programs, and all these roosters just have nowhere to go. And so I know the RSPCA is really challenged with it as well. So that's a huge challenge. And it's really challenging. I've thought about, we build another massive enclosure and stuff, but it doesn't stop the problem. And so we're really trying to raise awareness about school hatching programs for a start, because there's just so much hidden suffering in those programs that people aren't necessarily aware of. And we're at the pointy end of being hit with the end results of those projects when they turn out to be roosters. So
it's interesting, isn't it, that you spend a lot of time on the caring side, but you can't avoid the advocacy piece.
Oh, no, definitely not. And it's really important to us as well. Yeah, for sure.
Kate, you obviously have a lot of challenges ahead of you. Some you can control and some you can't. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners in terms of lessons learned and ways that you think that might help another organization that may be similar or not?
Yeah, I guess so. We're quite a small organisation, I guess, in the scheme of things, and we're 10 years old next year. And in looking back at it, we've just been driven by our passion. So that's gotten us through this amount of time. But we only really probably started to do things strategically probably about 4 or so years ago. So if I had any advice for someone starting out, I'd say get that strategy in place up in front, because passion will take you so far, but we could have grown financially a lot faster if we had have had that in place. Obviously, our voice is resonating with a lot of people, and so we've had that support. But I think having had the strategy, it would have just made things a lot easier as well. I think we probably would have a lot more human resource capacity if we had done that earlier. Yeah.
And are you talking specifically around the fundraising strategy?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. We reached out to a consultant a few years ago who was fantastic, and just went through everything that we had, all our data, did a review of where our weaknesses were and what we could do to improve that. And so still a work in progress in implementing all of those things, but it's just been fantastic. And I'd just say, reach out for help where you can, and connect with people who've got those parts of you that are missing, because obviously I'm spread over a lot of different areas, but there's definitely areas that I'm weak in, and just getting that help from other people is just invaluable.
I think good advice. There's a lot of not-for-profits I've spoken to on this show, and that are quite small as well. And I'm talking to the founder, and they too are struggling with trying to take some hats off. So good advice for most of them. It starts really with funding.
Definitely, yeah. We've really realised that is a core to everything we do. Like, without it, we've made this promise to these animals in our care, and we can't keep that promise. So it's integral.
If people want to support Little Oak Sanctuary, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to do it is if you'd like to make a donation to us, or just find out more about our work and get involved. We're always taking volunteers. So our website is littleoaksanctuary.org. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as well.
And given you're running everything, I assume that if they contact the website or you on Facebook, you're probably going to be the one to answer.
That's right, yeah.
Well, you could probably use some more volunteers too. So
definitely. People
that live in the, General Canberra, regional New South Wales?
Yeah, we have people coming from Sydney as well occasionally. They just, and that'll be easier once we have our accommodation. You can come down for the weekend and that sort of thing. But we do have people driving down just for the day, and it's a long way, but they quite enjoy it. So yeah,
we might have to set up that fundraiser now if they want to come for the weekend and pay for that opportunity.
Yeah.
All right, Kay. Thank you so much for sharing the story of Little Oak Sanctuary. I, personally have had so many dealings with you over the years just because of Chris.
Yeah.
And I've followed your story and also Chris's story until he passed away recently. It's been lovely to see animals that would normally not have a long life be able to live till old age.
Yeah.
And the work that you do, I think, like you said, to give them a voice is something that is really missing out there. So thank you for what you and James and the rest of your volunteers do.
Oh, thanks, Tammy, and thanks for having us and giving us this opportunity to share it.
Hi, this is Tammy again. When I'm not doing podcast, I'm helping not-for-profits with IT decisions. The question for this week's IT in Plain English segment is, does it matter which Microsoft license we buy? If your organization is a Microsoft user already, then you already have Microsoft 365 licenses. However, the question I always need to ask my clients is, which ones? The reason why this is important is that Microsoft 365 Business Premium provides significantly more cybersecurity and IT administration tools than the Business Standard and Business Basic options. And therefore, if you're not using the right license, you could be taking on more cybersecurity risk than necessary. The caveat is, though, that you or your outsourced IT providers must properly configure the various components and related policies to make this work. Now, business premium license do cost double the cost of the business standard license. However, if you're an eligible not-for-profit, you can get these licenses for significant discounts and sometimes for even free. Furthermore, I find that many organizations are already paying for some cybersecurity software anyway, so the difference in switching to business premium is often minimal. So there you have it in plain English. If you have an IT question you want answered, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message. I just might answer it on the show. And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave me a review. To all of you executives with a cause, the world is definitely a better place because of you. Thank you for what you and your teams do every day.